Good evening, and I'd like to call to order the May 17th, 2010 meeting of the Los Gatos Town Council. This would be an excellent time for you to turn off your phone or put it on to vibrate. And I would like to ask for a roll call, please.
Councilmember Mike Wasserman.
Here.
Councilmember Steve Rice.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Spector. Here. Vice Mayor Joe Pazinski.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Diane McNutt.
Here. I wanted to announce at the beginning of the meeting, just in case some of you don't stay till the end, that we will be adjourning tonight's meeting in memory of Susie Nagpal, the Saratoga City Council person who passed away last week from a 7-month battle against cancer. The next portion of our agenda is the Future Leaders Program, and this is an opportunity for us to identify and to celebrate young people in our community who have already shown great promise as future leaders. And we have with us tonight Brooke Landash, right? Come on up, Brooke. Brooke is a 6th grader at CT English Middle School. And let me tell you a little bit about her. She was the student council secretary in 4th and 6th grade. She helps with after-school classes at Loma Prieta Elementary School. She performs in school plays. She enjoys reading and musicals. She plays soccer and volleyball. She rides horses, exclamation point, exclamation point. I wonder who wrote that. Miss Pamela. And she sings the national anthem at rodeos, and if we had known about that earlier, we might have changed tonight's agenda and had her sing for us tonight, but we won't put her on the spot unexpectedly here. So if you would please stand, she's going to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Applause, please, for Brooke. We have a little gift for you, and then the council members would like to shake your hand, and that would be the 4 that are standing. Okay. Thank you, Brooke. And I've explained to Brooke and her dad that they don't need to stay through the entire budget session tonight, so she can leave whenever she would like to go work on homework. Thank you so much for coming. We do have... we do have a special proclamation this evening, so I'd like to have Elise Parsons come forward to accept it. And actually, this was Elise's idea, her suggestion. I thought it was an excellent one. So come around. And I'll let you hold the proclamation while I read what it says. Whereas incivility has become too prevalent in today's complex and competitive society, and whereas the Association of Image Consultants International has launched the National Civility Counts Project in an effort to help communities throughout the U.S. commit to infusing civility into individuals' behaviors and communications with each other. And whereas incivility adversely affects the quality of life in our community. And whereas the town of Los Gatos will join in this national effort to embrace civility by asking our community to be attentive, considerate, kind, giving, polite, and thoughtful, and to follow the principles of respect, restraint, and responsibility in all our interactions with each other. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Diane McNutt, by the virtue of the authority vested in me as the mayor of town of Los Gatos, do deem it appropriate and do hereby proclaim May 2010 as Civility Awareness Month within the town of Los Gatos, and urge all residents to commit to practicing civility in their daily lives today and every day. Elise, would you like to speak?
Thank you so much, Mayor. I'm very proud to be accepting this proclamation on behalf of the Association of Image Consultants International, or as we say, AICI. We're going to be having our annual international conference in Vancouver this week from May 21st to the 24th. And at that time, all of the cities that have signed proclamations, their proclamations will be there, as well as business leaders, and so Los Gatos will be honored. In addition to that, the PR Bible, Chase's calendar of events, will be including these proclamations. We are going to have members from 40 different countries at this conference, and so Los Gatos will be honored along with the other cities' proclamations. We first introduced this concept 1 year ago at our international conference in Los Angeles, and at that time the mayor of Los Angeles signed a proclamation. So I am just so proud that the city that my husband and I are happy to call home has gone ahead and done this. We really, really appreciate it. The other thing that will happen is there will be a press release immediately following the conference mentioning all of the cities that participated in the conference. So thank you so much, Diane.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Elise contacted me about this several months ago, long before the national situation caused us to think that we needed a reminder about civility. So the timing was very good. We also have a couple of other special announcements tonight, and it's really appropriate that both of these hit on tonight on the budget session, because as we go through the discussion and as we go through the proposed documents, what we see is how much of the services that we offer to our community are based on our employees. We really rely on them to provide to our residents the services that they need and the services that they want. They've done an excellent job. They've been challenged with the budget cutbacks we've had the last few years. Will continue to be challenged, and it's just a really nice opportunity as we talk about difficult budget to also acknowledge our appreciation for what they do. So the first proclamation that we have is National Public Works Week. And Todd Capurso, are you accepting tonight? Todd is the Director of Public Works and Parks and Public Works. And I believe up here on the back, you're going to talk about in a minute, is a display of everything that falls under your department. So I'll let you hold this while I read it. Whereas National Public Works Week was instituted as a public education campaign by the American Public Works Association 50 years ago in 1960, and calls attention to the importance of public works in community life. And whereas public works infrastructure, facilities, and services are of vital importance to the health, safety, and well-being of the citizens of Los Gatos and are an integral part of our everyday lives. And whereas the quality and effectiveness of the public works system and its facilities, as well as their planning, design, and construction, is vitally dependent upon the effort and skills of public works professionals. And whereas it is important for citizens to be aware of the range of services provided by our dedicated public works employees throughout the town, including maintaining more than 20,000 trees, 100 miles of streets, and more than 100 acres of parks, open space, and trails. Now, therefore, be it resolved, I, Diane McNutt, by virtue of the authority vested in me as the mayor of town of Los Gatos, do deem it appropriate and do hereby proclaim May 16th through the 22nd as National Public Works Week within the town of Los Gatos, and call upon all citizens, civic leaders, and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing our public works and recognize the contributions which public works professionals make every day to ensure our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. Applause, please, for Todd and his crew.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is very special to recognize National Public Works Week this week. It is the 50th anniversary of this recognition, and it's kind of appropriate as we go through our budget hearings tonight, and you'll hear particularly on the capital side that this is a very exciting time to be in the public works field. There'll be a lot of new projects that you'll hear about that should provide for an improved quality of life for all residents of the town. But this is also a time to thank those who we work with in the public works field. So as the mayor mentioned, we have the signs and display boards behind us that highlight some of the activities and employees that those perform in our department. But I would also like to ask those from Parks and Public Works to please stand, if you would. We have staff here from just about every division in the department, so we'll start with our Assistant Director, also representing engineering, as he is the town engineer, Mr. Kevin Rohani. Our Street Superintendent, Steve Regan. We have our Capital Projects Manager, Bruce Smith. Management Analyst, Tim Kawasaki. And our Administrative Specialist, that would be Jeanette Judd. So I'm very fortunate to work with these 5 folks, but the entire rest of the department as well. We have about 30 other people who perform the work on a day-to-day basis. And in recognition of Public Works Week, we are also holding an open house down at the yard this week on Wednesday, May 19th from 9 to 2 p.m. So we invite all of you to come down and take a tour of the yard. We'll have our equipment on display, have a demonstration of the sign shop, and we'll have some limited refreshments and souvenirs as well. So once again, thank you to the mayor and council.
You want to give them the address?
Oh, yes, I would. Thank you. That would be 41 Miles Avenue, which it's just along Highway 17 down right next to Balzer Field, for those of you who know where that is, 41 Miles Avenue. Thanks again.
And again, it's appropriate for this evening, when it's all about money, to present the annual award that we seem to win every year, year after year after year, for Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. Hello. So, wait, hold this. That's for my paperwork.
Okay.
This is the 12th time the town has received this award. It's the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for fiscal year 2009-10 from the Government Finance Officers Association. To receive this award, you must be rated as proficient in 4 categories designed to assess how well the budget serves as a policy document, a financial plan, an operations guide, and a communications guide. And because it's written by Steve Conway, and Jenny Hayarama, it must also be easy to read and entertaining on occasion, right? So applause, please, for Steve and his entire team. And I'm going to let Steve say a few words, because I understand that you have an entourage in various parts of the country watching this evening on streaming. Yes, okay. Go ahead.
I have a childhood friend who watches the budget every year from London. So, Lynn, I hope you enjoyed tonight's budget presentation. I want to thank the mayor and the council for their support. This budget award is received hopefully every year, because this is what we strive for, is this award. It's more than just the award, it's all the work that goes into getting this award and the document and the professionalism that's required to get it. And that's one of the things that we take pride in, and I thank all the city staff, all the departments. It's a team effort, as I say, every year. But I would like to especially thank Jenny Hariyama, our budget manager, and also in the far corner, Gita Ngvari, who have really helped bring more and more professionalism to the whole process. And thank you so much. And also, of course, the new town manager. I guess not totally new, 2 years. And the assistant town manager. Also, and Rumi, our HR director, who all serve on the budget core team. So thank you all.
And I'll now ask for a slow closed session report.
Thank you, Mayor. The council did meet this evening in closed session on the 2 items on their closed session agenda, and did engage in deliberations, and no action was taken.
Next on the agenda are council matters and manager matters. We'll begin with council matters. Mr. Rice.
I have the pleasure of serving or representing the town and the town council on the county's Emergency Preparedness Committee. And one of the things that we discussed at the last meeting a couple weeks ago is a website that I would encourage everyone to go to and register at. It's www.alertscc.com, and that's alert SCC as in Santa Clara County. That will allow you to register any phone number, PDA, what else have they got? It's computer or device for the hearing impaired, in addition to your home phone or your even your fax machine, if you want to receive notices of anything that might be of concern or interest to you. For example, fires, floods, Amber Alerts, earthquake issues would all, you're getting an alert right now, would all come to the phone number or email address or text location of your choice. So we've had in Los Gatos fires, the creek has overflowed in various places, and this would be a way for you to be notified regardless of where you work or live. You can have notifications for wherever those two locations are. So if you work in San Jose but live in Los Gatos or whatever, you can have alerts for your specific location right down to your street address. And I would encourage everyone to go there. Again, it's www.alertscc.com.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Other council matters? I will just remind the public that it's still not too late to nominate someone for Senior of Distinction Award. The deadline is later this week. You can get all of the details and the nomination form on the town website. And this is an opportunity to really honor some of our residents age 65 plus who have contributed to the community or to their professional field. So if you could think of somebody, please put a nomination in. Manager matters.
Mayor and members of the council, a few items. Last Saturday, the town, in cooperation with numerous other organizations and entities, hosted our first bicycle rodeo, and it was a training opportunity here at the Civic Center for youth to learn safe riding and biking techniques involving, first led by the library and involving police department, community services, leadership Los Gatos, the recreation department, the fire department, and others. And we hope the program will grow in future years. Tomorrow is the deadline for submitting nominations to the Youth Commission for their youth-friendly business nomination process. And forms are available on the web, and it's for residents, youth in particular, to identify the most youth-friendly businesses in town. It's an ongoing program that was launched this year, and to apply by tomorrow so the Youth Commission can consider the nominations tomorrow night. Moving ahead, our town clerk administrator's office is once again a designated vote-by-mail location, so Los Gatos residents can drop off their completed ballots, sealed and signed, to the clerk administrator's office upstairs through Election Day on June 8th. And last, our boards and commission application process is open and closes June 11th, and we encourage all residents to consider volunteering with the town in a policy-making role on boards and commissions. That concludes staff's report prior to moving to Did You Know? Tonight's Did You Know, a program initiated by the mayor at the end of last year, is on donations and solicitations, and our presenter will be Finance Manager and Budget Manager Jenny Hariyama.
Well, good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Tonight's Did You Know actually is about the town giving program, and one unique aspect about the town is that we're a town filled with big hearts. Charitable contributions, in-kind contributions, and monetary contributions really do add to the town's services. They enhance town services. They also maintain our quality of life. Another important aspect about charitable contributions is that they are tax deductible. We are a tax exempt organization. And also we do regular updates of our donation opportunities, and tonight we'll be presenting that before you as a part of the budget development process. So a lot of us ask, how can my donation help? Well, there's a number of examples up here. $100 can provide safety equipment for youth police explorers. As much as $500 can provide irrigation control valves for town parks. For those interested in providing more information, or excuse me, getting more information, they can contact the manager's office at area code 408-354-6832. They can also email us at manager@losgatusca.gov. And we also have a nice website that we can visit and give more information at losgatusca.gov/donations. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions by council? No? And anything else, Mr. Manager? No? Okay. If you have any desire to speak on any item on tonight's agenda, please fill out one of the speaker cards located on the back of the chairs there and submit it. We have verbal communications next. I have a couple of cards and more on the way. I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Next, we have consent. These are items on the agenda that can be taken with one motion unless anyone on council wishes to pull an item or anyone in the public wishes to pull an item. Does anyone on council wish to pull an item off of consent? No. Does anyone in the public wish to pull an item off of consent? Then I will look for a motion on consent items.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Now we go to verbal communication. Okay, Mary Ann Hamilton.
Good evening, Mayor McNutt and council members. My name is Mary Ann Hamilton. I'm the chairman of the board of directors of KCAT TV 15, the Los Gatos Community Access TV station that's currently broadcasting this meeting and broadcasts the planning commission meetings as well each month. As you may have known, heard, we had an 8-hour broadcast yesterday of the Venue-a-thon, which was a fundraising telethon for both the venue, A Place for Teens, and KCAT. And I wanted to take this opportunity on behalf of the Board of Directors of KCAT to thank all the council members for your fantastic cooperation in supporting the event. Mayor McNutt and Councilmember Mike Wasserman were both part of the on-air talent who helped make our phones ring for several hours. Councilmember Spector and Vice Mayor Brzezinski were also on the air and also helped add a wonderful human face to the town government, so we appreciate your participation. Thank you all very, very much for helping make our first ever telethon a raging success. A couple of my colleagues will be here later during this evening to talk to you about what we actually raised, but it was very successful, we felt, from our first effort. I also wanted to thank the folks at KCAT, our staff and volunteers who put in enormous hours and months in the year and a half leading up to the telethon. The two gentlemen who are in the control booth here at the council chambers helped enormously, Russell and Ray, and also our station manager, Tom Bryan, who was just extraordinary in stepping into that role when he was hired in October, and also brought a huge amount of his own equipment from his production company in Fremont, and he brought that to help with all the production. The best part was seeing all of the folks in the community who got involved, not only from donating money, but also just stepping up to the plate and volunteering and getting involved in a number of ways. The best part for me yesterday afternoon was looking in the studio and seeing that almost our entire production staff and crew was made of students from Fisher Middle School and Los Gatos High School. So it was very, very exciting to see all of those young people getting involved in production and expressing themselves in this great way. So I want to just basically make a big shout out to the entire community for thank you all for helping make it a big success. And we hope that this will be the first of many, many more to come in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. And wait there just a moment. I was really pleased when I got your email earlier that you were going to be showing up, because it gives us an opportunity to say thank you to you and to Paul and to Lee and to everyone else who was involved in that, you and Paul in particular, because you were the two who were the face of the whole event as far as I was concerned. And as I mentioned on air yesterday, you folks spent thousands of hours in preparing for this, and we really appreciate that. So it's our turn to applause for you, okay? Thanks. I also want to clarify that when you said talent, that meant that we just made announcements that neither Mr. Wasserman or I sang, danced, nor played an instrument as far as I know. And that's a good thing. Yes, it is. Paul Dubois.
Thank you, Mayor McNutt, Vice Mayor Buzinski, members of Town Council, and staff. It's an honor to be here tonight to talk about the Venue-a-thon. We do see it as a success. It was our first effort. As we stand right now, we crossed the line. We were just at 10K in donations. More are coming in. We know that the town has graciously offered to match some of the funds on the Place for Teens side, and we're very thankful that will help. Would have liked to have seen a lot more money coming in, but this is the first time out. We also had a lot of great success. We literally had hundreds of students and members of this community involved in a community effort to put this thing on. We have provided something new that Los Gatos hasn't had. We have a brand new venue in town to showcase performing arts of our youth. And boy, I know if you watched that show yesterday, they were phenomenal. The singing, the dancing, the film cuts, the art, it was wonderful. And that was exactly what we intended to do, and it worked out great for us. I'm really pleased about it. In fact, one of the things that we had going on during the Venue-a-thon was something called you could vote for your favorite performers. And you're going to hear the results now for the first time ever. Nobody knows, even the ones who are watching out there in Los Gatos land. The top performer, vote getter, was Alexis Forche. She was top vote getter. The remaining groups all tied, and they're the second place ones. Matt Goldberg for Monologue. The Shootout video was voted best video. The dancers, the young dancers who danced there, and George the Robot. That was one of my favorites. And Mandy and the Rockets. So I congratulate all of those who participated. This was a really good thing. It gave the venue exposure, the venue, a place for teens, exposure to the community that we truly have a safe place for our youth in this community. It's a vibrant operation. And I can't thank Tom Bryant and the staff at KCAT. I just don't know what to say about those folks. They're phenomenal. They stepped up and ran a great show. That team, we worked together as a team for a year and a half to put this thing together, and it's, I think, very successful. And I'm looking forward to doing it again. I think we should run it annually. I think it's something that will be very, very successful in the future. And I'm here to really thank each and every one of you, starting with Diane McNutt, because as we started this whole process, you kind of looked over our shoulder and said, you know, Paul, if you did it kind of this way and this way, it would help. And we appreciate all of that advice. I really do. Mr. Larson, thank you for all of your strong support throughout this whole process. It's very important to us to make this a success. It is truly a success. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dubois, you want to wait? Mr. Larson, did you have a comment you want to make?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to remind the council that in February, you unanimously approved a grant agreement with the Place for Teens that provides $50,000 in matching funds, and that includes not only the contributions made at the Venue-a-thon yesterday, but through the end of June. So it's just an opportunity for further community giving and support to a Place for Teens, knowing that every new contribution will be matched by a grant that you approved just a few months ago.
And Mr. Dubois, I believe that if you still go to venueathon.org, that you can donate online, and that's going to stay up for a while, is it?
That is absolutely going to stay up. In fact, the Venue-a-thon, as you saw it yesterday, is being resegmented by KCAT, and they're going to show it in 13 half-hour segments. So it'll be up there. You still have an opportunity to send in donations. You can do it all for the remainder of the month. We will continue taking those donations, and we'll accept your donations as part of the Venue-a-thon. Thank you all. Thank you, Los Gatos.
Thank you. And this was Mr. Dubois' brainchild, so I know he was having some labor pains the other day. I was just kind of in anticipation how this is all going to work, but it worked out really well. Lee Fago.
Madam Mayor, council members, I just want to underscore the accolades and applause that were cast to you for your support, your encouragement, and it really is the encouragement that the teens see that they're getting the kind of support that helps them build the character that we want to see in our youth. The merchants in town have been incredibly supportive in the past in a lot of different efforts. When we went to them to ask them to help us, providing food, we're trying to feed kids while we're doing this event, they stepped right up. It's the sense of community that I want to acknowledge and appreciate and say to everyone in town, thank you for the encouragement for the kids as well as they were trying to figure out what their talents were, what they wanted to do, what they were willing to go public with. That's something for somebody in their preteens and early teens, tough to do. And they had the heart and the soul to do it, the passion of what they believed in themselves and what other people were doing to encourage them to come forth and put themselves out there to raise money for the Teen Center and for KCAT. And for some of the seniors in high school who participated, they're not going to be able to benefit from this. They will graduate before some of the programming, some of the activities are going to come into play that we're able to fund now. They're investing in their fellow students, in their siblings, in their friends who are coming up behind them. And that's a real sense of love that the kids are putting back into the community. So again, thank you for creating the environment. Thank you for participating in the way that you have to give our youth this opportunity, this stage, literally, to this platform to be able to present their skills, their own their own sense of themselves. So again, thank you for the encouragement that you've provided, and certainly thank you for the money.
Thank you. And, I could see the growth just yesterday because when we started, we had different stage managers who, and they were kind of hesitant about telling the mayor what to do. It's like, hey, guys, I'm in your hands here. And they got over that real quick and said, go there, do this. And it's like, okay. So they got a lot of confidence just in a very short period of time.
All the positions were filled by youth. Camera people, sound people, stage manager, people answering the phones, the kids who were addressing letters, all of that was youth. They were managing this. They were executing a plan that they put together. They got some guidance, and we appreciate that. But I really tip my hat to the kids.
Mr. Wasserman?
Yes, thank you. And through the mayor, Mr. Larson, the town's matching was through May or through June?
It's an open-ended contract at this point in time that you have previously approved based on discussion through June.
Through June? Thank you. Mr. Fagot, what I wanted to say was I wanted to make a donation to the Venue-a-thon. It was mentioned earlier, venueathon.org. Is that venue-a-thon.org?
That's it.
Okay, so you need to have the two dashes in there on either side of the A.
venue-a-thon.com.
Okay, and any contributions that come in now and for about the next 6 weeks will be doubled effectively because it's matched by the town.
That is correct.
Thank you.
That is correct.
We actually bought or registered every one of those iterations. So you can do Venue-a-thon without that.
So what the TV audience did not hear is every variation on venueathon.org is registered and will get you to the right page. So
Correct.
If you don't remember all the hyphens, then it'll still work.
Venueathon.
Venueathon.org.
However you want to spell it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I have no other cards for. Oh, I'm sorry. Did anyone over here want to say? No, I have no other cards for verbal communication. So we will move on to public hearings. We have just one, but it's a doozy tonight. So we are talking about operating and capital budgets. And the way this is going to go is that staff will do a presentation on an overview and the operating budget, and then council, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions on that. Then staff will do a presentation on capital improvement project budget, and you'll have an opportunity for questions. Then we will open it to the public hearing, and then close it, and council will then provide direction and action if needed on resolution. So, y'all ready? Then let's begin.
Thank you, Mayor McNutt and members of council. My name is Steve Conway, Director of Finance. It's my pleasure to present to you the proposed fiscal year 10-11 operating capital budget this evening. I'd like to start out by just setting the record about the kind of financial climate that the town is facing. We are, like the rest of the communities in this state and the nation, actually experiencing. We're not immune from experiencing the effects of the economic recession. We've been very fortunate in this town in that the level of downturn that we've experienced has not been as drastic or severe as other communities because we still remain a vibrant community, but we have no doubt experienced some economic downturns. So when we were looking at our budget preparation goals for fiscal year 10-11 this year, we realized that we would not be able to factor in our revenues very much growth at all. Our average growth was approximately 1% across most our categories. Some of our revenues had increases, but I would say the bulk of them were at the 1% range and very minimal, at the most 3%. But the bulk were very either flat. And for our community, flat revenue growth is considered a positive in this kind of climate. On the revenue side, that was a fairly stagnant forecast. On our cost of services, there were some uncontrollable costs related to labor, even though we had limited salary increases in fiscal year 9-10. Going into the future, and next year, there are costs that were unavoidable that we had to factor in for, mostly on the benefit side, that were uncontrollable from the town's end that we had to be cognizant of. So our strategy in developing the fiscal year 10-11 proposed budget was to balance, provide the council a balanced budget that maintains our service levels as best we could, which I think we did. That goal was achieved. We also took this opportunity as we were looking at the proposed budget to take advantage of some organizational transitions and efficiencies that have occurred, such as our senior center or neighborhood center transition with the Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation Department, and some other efficiencies that we've been able to go through our Parks and Public Works Department, library, and other departments, which not only delivered services more cost effectively, but also reduced cost across most of our line departments. And we use technology to also increase our service delivery, and that was very evident as the library, as I'll use an example, our library is using more and more technology to still, even though we may have less financial ability to deliver services, we're stepping up technology and using library resources such as downloadable books and other making a 24-hour availability of some of our library resources to the public, which we're very happy about. So we remain a financially healthy town. We have healthy reserves in place. Our property values are remaining stable. The latest news we have from the county tax collector's office is that we have approximately 0.09% growth for our tax roll for July 1, which is 0.1% below our estimate, and we're hoping that that'll turn around. If someone would just sell a high-priced home, we'd probably get there. But I hope that there'll be some buyers out in the spring looking for a great house in Los Gatos. But we're very close to the 1%, and I expect that hopefully we'll make that. We continue our emphasis on economic vitality. A program here in the town that's very important, and we were recently reviewed, and our bonds for our libraries, as council is aware, received the top rating of their investment grade bonds, the top rating that's available to a town our size, and that was just recently affirmed by both Moody's and Standard & Poor's. So we're very proud to say that that is also an outside party looking at our financial condition and ratifying what we believe is to be the case. So looking at 10-11, when we were looking at what was our goal, we had a $1.8 million budget gap that we were dealing with. And I'm pleased to say that we have achieved that goal. We needed to close that gap, and through all the hard work of all the staff and all the town departments, we were able to achieve that. We have approximately $2 million of budget right-sizing that we did. We achieved that through $1.1 million of staffing and salary and benefit reductions that occurred across all departments. We also had operating cost reductions of $200,000 that we incorporated into this proposed budget. And we have some new fees and fee adjustments that were part of our recent user fee and charges for services item that we brought forward to council I believe it was last meeting, and it was continued, I think it was on 2 recent council meetings. So that was a combined effort of new revenues and adjustments to revenue, also with expenditure savings that allowed us, if we go to the next slide, to present to you in our general fund, which is our operating fund, our key checkbook, a balanced budget proposed for fiscal year 10-11 of $34.2 million. That matches our general fund operating costs, and so our operating revenue is now balanced with our operating expenditures. And I will say that on that particular slide that our chief revenue still remains our sales tax, which, though down from recent highs of $9.2 million, still remains strong. And we have a forecast which recently affirmed that. I'd like to now discuss our updated 5-year forecast. The assumptions that we had, as I mentioned, were flat revenue growth, low growth or 0 to 3% across most categories through fiscal year 14-15. And we're assuming rising PERS. We have, because of PERS, there's an actuarial window of 2 years. In fiscal year 11-12, we'll be dealing with the challenge of an increased PERS contribution, Public Employees Retirement System contribution, that's uncontrollable. That's expected to increase substantially. And we have the implementation of my favorite topic, GASB 45 retiree health care costs, which we're phasing in over a 10-year period, but each year bumps a couple $100,000 that we need to set aside in our trust account to fund future retiree health costs. So our future challenges are, we have prepared and proposed this budget that dealt with the $1.8 million gap that we have. We have future challenges ahead of us, but we believe that we will meet those. Fiscal year 10-11-12 will be a challenge. Right now it's presenting at this point in time a $1.3 million gap that we'll be needing to address, and I think the town staff is always keeping that in the forefront of our minds as we make management decisions throughout the town, knowing that we'll have future challenges. We may also consider in the future, to help us bridge through until the economy does improve, some prudent use of our reserves, which we did set aside in our revenue stabilization reserve for just that case. If we have future downturns, we do have money set aside to address those also. So I would like to now...
Wait, before you turn it over?
Okay.
Is that what you were going to do?
Yes, I was.
Okay. We're going to pause and make sure that council doesn't have any questions.
Okay.
But I think they do. Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Conway, on slide number 6, balanced budget overview, you showed the general fund operating revenues. You mentioned largest sales tax, use property taxes. For our viewers at home, largest item on there, the $12 million under all other. Could you just explain a little bit about what makes up the all other?
I would be very happy to. The all other revenues is just what it said. It's all other, but it's really a combination of revenues not specifically called out here. So we have our investment earnings on our portfolio included in there. We have fines and forfeitures for traffic violations. That wouldn't amount to $12 million, I can assure you of that, unless they were...
excuse me, Mr. Conway, just the general public, so I'm looking on the sheet in the staff report, and when you mention like fines and forfeitures, it's a little bitty 0.6.
Yes.
I don't want to give the wrong impression when the public sees all other 40% being in that category, and when we talk about things like fines and forfeitures, that's a minuscule part. The interest is only $1 million.
Correct.
It's a minuscule part. So if you can focus on 3 or 4 of the largest ones, that would be more helpful for me.
Intergovernmental revenues, which is our federal and state revenues that the general fund receives, those account for $3.6 million of that 12.
Thank you.
Additionally, our business licenses is $1 million. Other licenses, other permits are in there for another $1 million. So,
excuse me, Mr. I don't mean to interrupt you, but licenses and permits are already.
Okay, they're already there, I'm
1.9.
sorry. I'm just looking at my general fund totals here.
Yeah.
So that's already broken out separately. Franchise fees are another $2 million. That's our garbage, electric, sewer, our garbage, electric, cable, and thinking one other one, just can't think of it right off the top of my head. But those are our franchise fees. So TOT, and also our transient occupancy taxes is another $1 million.
And a VLF backfill property tax?
VLF backfill is also a property tax revenue received in lieu of the vehicle license fees.
Thank you. And that's in addition to the property tax that's up there. It's a separate item that's in the all other, correct?
Correct. That's another $2.4 million.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
you're
very
welcome.
much.
Any other questions for Mr. Conway? Now we'll allow you to move on to the next segment.
Great. Well, thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Let me just take some moment to get to the next slide. Okay, so next we'll be talking about budget impacts, and I'll be covering townwide impacts as well as departmental impacts. The first item is townwide staffing and salary reductions. This can be found on A3 of the transmittal letter. And approximately 8 FTE vacancy eliminations, that includes temporary hours, is what we're proposing as a part of the 10-11 budget. It also includes reduced furloughs and overtime reductions. I'd like to point out that we are going from 5 days or 40 hours of furlough time to 3 days or 24 hours, and we will revisit this at mid-year in 2011. Moving on to departmental impacts, community development, which is found on D63, reflects a reduction of 2 FTEs through vacancy and restructuring opportunities. This also established a flexible career series for planners to move up the career ladder. It also provides the opportunity for a shared building inspector due to the reduced development activity. In your desk item also discusses the use of the North 40 developer fees to partially fund staff related to that project. Parks and Public Works, there's a 2.5 FTE reduction to better align workload with service demands. It also reflects a reclassification of a parks supervisor to a parks and facilities superintendent, has a much broader range of responsibilities. And it also includes a limited 2-year funding via the CIP for the PPW facilities supervisor. And again, that position will be dedicated to the construction of the library project. Moving on to the police department, there is an elimination of 1 vacant police officer, and in addition, 0.5 FTE to address dispatch staffing needs. In community services, a reduction of 2 FTEs due to the lease of the neighborhood center to the Los Gatos Rec. However, it also provides an opportunity for us to expand our senior services through a contractual obligation with the Los Gatos Rec. I didn't refer to the page number, that is D197. Police department was found on D95. And then finally, we have the library. This begins on D237. And in preparation of the new library, we also will be exploring restructuring options to address ongoing management and financial needs. This is going to include elimination of a senior management position, as well as 2 hourly supervisors, will be elevated to management to address any operational issues or to mitigate impacts as a result of the elimination of the senior management position. The library will remain open 7 days a week for 50 hours. The original hours per week was 54, so that's a net reduction of 4 hours per week. In addition to this cost savings, the operating hours have been standardized to better reflect the hours used by customers and also increased use of online services. And that concludes my remarks.
And let's see if we have any questions. Mrs. Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question for Ms. Hariyama. You talked about the loss of 8 FTEs at the beginning of your presentation, and it might be helpful, at least it would have been helpful to me maybe a year ago or 6 years ago, if you could explain to the public that we're not losing employees, that these are vacant positions or there are people who are moving around. If you could just explain people aren't being laid off or fired and why we still have 8 FTEs being lost.
Well, actually, I think you did a pretty good job of explaining that yourself. They are vacant positions that are eliminated. And what we've done is you've noticed that there's been a lot of restructuring that's been in the presentations. And so what we've done is we've taken a look at those eliminating vacancies and restructured the deployment of services to reflect what available resources that we have. The FTEs that are being reduced also reflect all of the temporary hours. So this is a total FTE count, not position count. I believe, if I'm not misspeaking, it would be 9 FTEs for positions.
Other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next segment.
In response to a council request, we wanted to do a quick overview of our reserve status, since this is one of the core aspects of the town of Los Gatos' financial strength. So you will find this information detailed in page C24 of the budget. The first category, restricted general fund reserves, are for specific notes and loans and are reserved for those purposes. Then when we move to the designated reserves, are a series of reserves that have been set aside by prior council action. The first one, the Revenue Stabilization Reserve, is really the reserve the council has established to deal with economic fluctuations such as the one we are in a prolonged period of now, dating back to 2008, and as the 5-year forecast that Mr. Conway presented, continuing for at least several more years. So this is our core asset and strength that protects the town for the future. The funding for this reserve comes from the very conservative and wise approach the council has long established of setting aside a portion of the Netflix revenues so that we're not overly dependent on a single taxpayer, where if that taxpayer were to move, sell, or change their business model, we would be faced with an overwhelming gap in our funding that would be hard to respond to. And so a portion of the year-end revenue every year, next year proposed to be about $600,000, would go into the Revenue Stabilization Reserve. An additional $600,000 goes into the Capital and Special Projects Reserve, which is two lines down on the chart on your screen and also reflected in the budget. That is the source of funds that pays for the town-funded capital projects, largely street and road maintenance, that has no dedicated funding stream other than our ending fund balance. The rest of the reserves listed up there are for specialized and dedicated purposes. The Economic Uncertainty Reserve is really a reserve for another natural disaster. Imagine Loma Prieta 2. Let's hope not, but we need a reserve for some natural calamity because redevelopment won't be an available tool to rebuild and restructure the town in the face of that calamity. The balance of the reserves are all for the designated purposes identified in the slide. So to summarize, while we have $20 million total in restricted and designated fund balances, the town's fiscal future is really dependent on the Revenue Stabilization Reserve and the Capital Special Project Reserve for the next 5 years. And that leads to the next slide, where on page 6 of the staff report, staff outlined a number of transitional opportunities for council consideration. And the bulk of these were proposals for council consideration to use reserves on a one-time basis to help cure that 5-year problem that Mr. Conway laid out earlier. And to simplify this discussion, I did want to highlight a few changes for you. First, if you move to the bottom of the list, and it would help if I put it on the screen, the space reuse plan, we have identified another alternative source of funding that we would be bringing back to you on June 7th related to the library construction contract and bond sale. So we can strike that space reuse plan from consideration at this time. The numbers 1, 3, 4, and 5, the library consolidation, benefits restructuring, police services consolidation, and police alternative work schedule study, I wanted to highlight for the council's consideration because these are really one-time investments staff would recommend that will help identify opportunities for solving our financial challenges a year from now and for the following 3 years. And given our conservative approach to the use of reserves, I would actually recommend, if the council wishes to proceed, that we consolidate those 4 line items into a single appropriation of $100,000. That's $30,000 less than if you total up each of the individual lines. And that would just be an appropriation in non-departmental for future balancing studies and strategies. And staff would use those funds to complete these studies. Some of the work is already underway. The police department has already started the work under the leadership of Sergeants Frisbee and Harris to look at alternative work schedule options. The police services consolidation, largely focusing on dispatch, would likely be a joint study we do with the city of Campbell, because we believe there may be joint economies of scale through that effort. The library consolidation would be to pursue an opportunity of joining with the county library system, as most other cities of our size in this county do, to see if there's any way that services could be provided more cost effectively to our residents. And then benefits restructuring is probably the most important, because as the finance director outlined, it's our benefit costs that are rising most rapidly in our 5-year forecast. And we wish to work with our bargaining units to find ways to better manage that. So far what I've really presented is to drop the space reuse plan allocation due to alternative funding, to consolidate the library consolidation, benefits restructuring, police services consolidation, and police alternative work schedule study into a single appropriation of $100,000 for future balancing studies that staff would report back to council over the next 6 months. Moving on to the new library transition, this is an opportunity for the council's consideration to look at either making a grant to the Friends of the Library to re-engage our retiring library director to support the community outreach needed to achieve the FF&E goal, as well as we had set aside some potential funding to bring on additional professional library services, particularly related to a move of the library, if needed, over the next 2 years. Both the county librarian as well as the city of San Jose librarian have expressed their willingness to assist the town should we wish to pursue that. But again, that new library transition is fully an optional allocation for the council's consideration. Similarly, the emergency preparedness allocation at the bottom of the list is a set-aside of funding for the council's consideration to meet what was specified as a council priority for the next 2 years. We have presented you a draft work plan. You could either set this money aside at this point in time to fulfill that work plan, or when we bring the work plan back to you in the future, we could request funding at that time, subject to council direction tonight. The last one on the list is police overtime, which is a staff recommendation to be included as an allocation to the police department at this time. The police department has done considerable efforts over the last 2 years to reduce, manage, and control overtime. The overtime in the department continues to appear to be underfunded by about $72,000. We would recommend for next year a one-time allocation as we consider additional ways to manage overtime off into the future. So I've tried to simplify these set of recommendations to make it easier for council consideration during the next 2 weeks. That concludes staff report on the operating budget.
Okay, council questions. Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Larson. I wanted to thank you on the general fund reserve status for making it clear to the public that we didn't have $20 million sitting aside, that we could do anything we wanted to. I was looking at that one Vasona land sale, the Creekside complex that we're working on, and I know that we've made a promise as far as using those monies for the development and youth sports and for the development of that complex. So I appreciate your clarifying revenue stabilization and the economic uncertainty, and bringing up a reminder about earthquake possibilities, fire possibilities, or the loss of our number one sales tax provider. And I think that's an important clarification in these times to make, that we don't just have extra millions hanging around. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Mr. Manager, with this this breakout, that brings it 357 down to now what's
A recommended allocation by staff of 172,000. 100 for the future balancing studies and strategies, and 72,000 for police overtime, and then 2 pots of 40,000 for council consideration as you so choose to meet your priorities and needs.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? No? Okay, then we're going to move into the next phase, yes?
We're going to have a quick shifting of chairs and invite Todd Capurso, our Director of Parks and Public Works, to come forward to present the CIP.
Thank you, Greg, and good evening, Mayor and members of the council. It's my pleasure to provide the overview and some even more specific information regarding the town's capital budget, and I will wait for the slides to catch up. Here we go. In proposing projects for the 5-year CIP, the staff does consider a number of factors. We first evaluate our current year process and where the projects are and how much progress has been made and what has not yet been completed. We also consider the council's adopted 2010 through 12 strategic goals, and we focus specifically on the areas of quality public infrastructure and civic enrichment. We propose new projects and evaluate these goals and prioritize them against the available funding. We then prepare a draft of the CIP, which is then reviewed by the Planning Commission, as it was this past April 13th. This process has resulted in the proposed 2010 through 15 capital improvement program, which has a combined 5-year total of $37.7 million worth of projects. The good news is approximately 70% of that funding, approximately $27 million, is available in 2010-11 and will provide for the immediate benefit of a multitude of projects. $23 million of that is through carry forward projects, and $4 million of that is new or expanded use of funding. Most of the carry forward total is represented by the library project as it moves into its construction phase. Staff is also proposing an expanded use of the town's traffic mitigation fund to improve roadway safety for both drivers, bicyclists, and pedestrians in 3 specific areas. The first area is along Blossom Hill Road between Cherry Blossom and Camino del Cerro. We will also do a similar type of project along Wedgwood Avenue between Mulberry and Granada. And both of these projects will include the installation of sidewalks, bike lanes, and other pedestrian-oriented safety improvements, as they are heavily used by both elementary and middle school students. So when we refer to the widening of those 2 roads, it's not for vehicular purposes, it's more for pedestrian and bicycle improvements. We also propose the reconfiguration of the Highway 9 University intersection in a very similar fashion to what we're just now wrapping up at University and Blossom Hill Road. The most notable improvement there would be the installation of dedicated left turn lanes, which provides for safety of pedestrians and bicyclists, but in that case, a huge improvement for the safety of drivers. All 3 of these are slated for design during 2010-11. Construction of the Highway 9 and University intersection would actually occur during the same fiscal year if we could provide for the design quick enough. The other 2 projects are slated for design during 10-11, but would actually be constructed during fiscal year 11-12, the following year. We will continue to pursue grant funding opportunities for these projects as well. They're both good candidates for Safe Routes to School grants, but in the event that we're unsuccessful, we have allocated town funding for those projects and would like to move forward on those. We will additionally pursue several large-scale street maintenance projects to restore the town's pavement condition index to a level of at least 70. You'll see an increased amount of seal coat work in targeted residential areas. In fact, we'll be bringing a contract before council of about $1.5 million just next month. It will be awarded in 2009-10, but the work will actually be done in 2010-11. We will also develop strategies and options to improve the condition of streets in the Almond Grove district as well. That will be one of our projects for 10-11, not likely to actually propose improvements in that area for the following fiscal year, but if we are successful in developing that plan, we would then have to implement that strategy the following year as well. I would probably like I'm going to ask Greg to put the entire slide on the board, if you would, because I'd like to next talk about the Parks program. The priority in the Parks program is on accessibility and safety. It's most notably, our most notable project in that area is improving access to the pageant grounds and achieving better connectivity to both the new library and the Civic Center. And additionally, we'll be retrofitting play lots at 3 neighborhood parks across town for improved safety and ADA access as well. And the reason I wanted Greg to put the entire slide on the board there, because I wanted to save our largest and most prominent projects for last, which of course are our new proposed public facilities. Most notably will be the construction of the new library, which is scheduled to begin this summer, and council will be asked to award a construction project just next month. And not too far behind that, we will begin the master planning process for the new Los Gatos Creekside Sports Park, which will be located on University Avenue just north of the Sonoma County Park. So as you can see, and as I mentioned earlier during the proclamation, this is a very exciting time to be in Public Works. There will be significant capital development in the town well beyond next fiscal year, resulting in improved public facilities for all town residents. And now we would be happy to answer questions or provide additional information with regard to the capital program. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if I may just add, it's good we recognized Parks and Public Works earlier. They're going to be very busy for the next 2 years, and just appreciate the leadership of Todd, Kevin, and the rest of the department. I did want to highlight that while we're excited to have all these capital projects, as with the reserve discussion before, the funding for virtually all of these projects comes from dedicated resources that cannot be used for ongoing day-to-day service delivery. So we're lucky to have set up those structures previously through redevelopment and otherwise to be able to fund these capital projects, because it's letting the time move forward, letting the town move forward even in these very difficult economic times.
Thank you. Let's see if we have any questions. I know we have a couple. Mr. Wasserman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Capurso. Question for you, one slide back. When we were talking about restoring the PCI to 70 or above that, I know it says in the staff report we dropped down to 69 overall.
Correct.
But in that, the arterials are at a very impressive 85. The collector streets at 70, which is the average that we're trying to attain. But it's our residential streets that are at 64 that concerns me a lot. Is the plan to bring up the 64 before we do a whole lot of anything with the stuff that's at 85?
That's a very good question.
I'm just saying, for one, if we're trying to get to 70,
right.
I'm certainly not one who wants to have something at 50 and something at 90.
No, our goal is to bring up the overall, well, as you said, bring up the overall PCI, but how do we do that? We obviously have more work to do on both the collector streets and the residential streets. One of the things that we struggle with is that most of our grant opportunities will only allow funding for work on arterials or collectors. So as you can see, our arterials are in, as you say, pretty good shape. So as we go after grants, we're likely going to focus on some of our busier collector streets. With regard to residential streets, just about our only option is the town funding that the town manager talked about a couple slides ago on as far as dedicated funding sources go and how we allocate money in our reserves. So we will do the best we can with town funding on residential streets. We do have the opportunity to do a fairly large-scale project over about the next 6 months, and the goal there is to catch our streets in a condition which we can still seal coat them and gain a significant benefit. So the more money that we could spend on chip seal, cape seal, slurry seal, as opposed to overlay, our money will go a lot further. But you're absolutely right. What we'd like to have is a PCI over 70 where all three categories come up, not a big disparity among the three categories.
Thank you. And with all respect, when you talk about grant funding, that's funding from another source. That's not use of town money.
That's
so
correct.
when I look at residential streets now at 64, I understand grant funding goes towards streets that are used more often, predominantly the arterial streets. But we're not here to decide where grant money goes. We're here to decide what's most appropriate for the town's monies and dollars. While I wish you could get grant funding for residential, and I'm sure you do too, you know, I understand that, but the safe rides, all that stuff is grant funding. It's not our money. What I'm looking at is the revenue that we have and where they should go at. And I, for one, certainly want to see some of our dollars go so that residential streets don't fall below 64, which is 10% below already the minimum that you want to be at.
That's right.
Other questions? Mrs. Spector.
Well, let me follow up on that same issue. Some givens. We know that there's grant funding, as you pointed out, that goes to a specific project. We know that there are town funds. We know that the PCI is low for our residential areas. The two areas that concern me are the Almond Grove residents and then the Highway 9 University intersection. Now, with regard to the Highway 9 University intersection, we have the grant funding, but when I looked at the budget, there is, and I can't remember what it is, there's not much happening, maybe a design or something to that effect. So one question would be, can't we do more at that intersection given the fact, within the next year, given the fact that we have the grant funding? And then the other question is, with regard to town monies, couldn't we, is it possible to reprioritize to focus more on the residential, specifically Almond Grove? I think you answered that question, but I think I need to hear it again.
Thank you. Let me first address the Highway 9 University intersection. I believe we're showing in the capital budget a combined total of $1.1 million going toward that project. And there's a challenge there because we do have a lot of work to do in a fairly small area. We're not likely to be able to expand that intersection by any type of acquiring right-of-way, so it's really going to be a reconfiguring of that intersection, establishing sufficient left turn lanes, particularly in the north-south direction. And we're going to have to do that. But in order to accomplish that, there's going to be a significant amount of utility relocation work. So we're actually going to spend a good portion of the money that we've received already on doing work that has to actually be done before we can get to the improvements that we want to do. Now, because we do have that funding essentially secure as you can ever have grant funding until it's time for reimbursement, we're actually going to proceed on that project. And as I mentioned earlier, we will hit the design first, but we will not be waiting another fiscal year to do the construction. Once we complete the design, we will begin construction on that one. With regard to the Almond Grove, that is a particularly difficult challenge. The majority of the roadways and streets up there are of concrete construction. And unfortunately, with concrete construction, that doesn't lend itself to any sort of inexpensive preventive maintenance. Essentially, you're left with what our only option may be. We're going to evaluate this, of course, but the option may be that we need to reconstruct those streets. There's varying depths of concrete out there, anywhere from 3 inches to 6 inches. So even to treat that, that may not be sufficient to handle the type of traffic that we want it to handle anyway. We do have some other options that we will look at on each segment. We're actually going to have to probably look at each block on its own because there is no universal treatment up there. Now, of course, there are also what we sometimes forget, and I was reminded of earlier this afternoon, there are some asphalt streets in there as well. that we should not overlook as we take our other projects forward as we treat Residential Street and the other areas of town. So we will be up there this summer doing some patchwork in some of the streets that are asphalt that need some immediate attention. We will get to those over the next few months. And then we will even consider doing additional preventive maintenance work on those as we move forward into a similar contract next fiscal year. But we're really still, we have yet to determine what the most appropriate treatment would be of the concrete streets. And that's the reason why we would do this further study and evaluation. But we will do that this fiscal year.
Mr. Larson?
And Mayor, members of the council, you will recall in the 2-year priority setting process that you just went through, you've directed staff to make Almond Grove a priority for the next 2 years, trying to deal with this concrete versus asphalt issue is one of those studies that Todd mentioned that we'll focus on this year. And then also just the sheer magnitude of the cost that we're facing. We don't really have our arms around that, and until we answer the asphalt concrete question, we won't. Once we have that figured out, we then have to come up with the funding mechanism to do the work. This will certainly be millions of dollars that is not eligible, most likely not eligible for any grant funding or even from the town's own traffic mitigation funds, which have to be used for capacity enhancing. So we'll have to look for a considerable reallocation of all other capital funds or a sale of some idle assets to provide funding that could be allocated to this project, and that's what you've directed your staff to come back and present to you over the next few months.
And I'm going to just interject a question since it plays off of the one that Mrs. Spector just raised. I remember reading somewhere the definition of Almond Grove for these purposes, which I think we need to make sure we're all clarified, is from Almendra to Maine, North Santa Cruz to Glen Ridge, correct? Is that, so when you're talking about Almond Grove, is that your understanding that was in here somewhere?
That is the verbiage that's in the document, and to be quite honest, that's carryover verbiage. I think we need to revisit that as well, because if we focus on that area, which we wouldn't want to exclude, but if we focus solely on that area, we would actually exclude other concrete streets in the same area, which we would have to develop a similar strategy for anyway. So I'm going to advocate for expanding the definition of Almond Grove, maybe not for historic district purposes, but for the purposes of studying the streets and evaluating what our strategies would be.
I think that's going to be important as you bring forward the recommendations, because as Almond Grove has continued to become a neighborhood of choice, it's kind of like happens in other areas, the boundaries get broader and broader to increase the values of your property. And then I also wanted to ask about Royce, which would be on the other side of North Santa Cruz, which is in disgraceful condition, and wondered what the plans were for that.
Well, there's actually 2 sections of roadway between University and North Santa Cruz that we're very concerned about, one being Royce and one being that block of Bachman as well. So we'll actually be taking a look at both of those probably prior to wrapping up the evaluation on the Almond Grove district, because it seems like there have been treatments done. Even though those are both very short blocks, there have been a variety of treatments done over that very short block on each one of those roadways. So we'll certainly look at what we can do to each one of those over the next fiscal year as well. I think we'll have opportunities in either part of a Cape Seal project, if it's applicable, or even overlay or reconstruction. But I do believe that those, because of their location and proximity to the downtown core, plus they're completely surrounded by streets that have a PCI of about 85, it makes their condition even worse by comparison. So we certainly need to focus our efforts on those 2 particular blocks.
And heavily used by pedestrians and therefore at high risk. Vice Mayor Brzezinski, you asked?
Yes, I do have a question. This is procedural, Madam Mayor. We are dealing with individual streets now, and I'm wondering if we are going to deal with the packet we've got on the CIP at this point, or is this something that needs to be addressed later?
My understanding is staff has presented all they're going to on the packet, and so this is an opportunity for questions. We'll open it for a public hearing after questions, although I have no cards right now, and then we'll have council comment. So I would say if you have a specific question on the packet, now's the time, and if you have a comment, then later.
The question on the packet is, again, related to the Almond Grove Street rehab, and you have a desk item that indicated some of the issues there. I wonder if, while you're inclusive of the Almond Grove, and I believe, Mr. Capurso, it is important to expand that definition, okay, that the Glen Ridge area immediately west is very much in need of attention as well at this time. And I know that we're moving to do some testing to determine what would be the best way to attack the concrete streets. I know that Glen Ridge is a concrete street, and one thing that is obvious up there is that when you're driving down Glen Ridge or any of the Almond Grove streets, you know you're in the Almond Grove because your car tells you that really quickly. But I think that we must pay attention to what's immediately west, because that's a whole neighborhood that has some significant repair issues, and I think at least some pavement rehab to eliminate the potholes and to attempt to create something that is a little bit more viable. So it's really more of a statement. Do you have any comment to that?
I would first say I agree, because as we mentioned earlier, there's a variety of concrete streets up there in a variety of conditions, and to be quite honest, some of them are really not in that bad of condition, but that's the vast minority for sure. But even the ones that are in poor condition, there are no easy treatments for those streets, as opposed to some of the asphalt streets up there, which I know I mentioned before, but we'll actually be going up there over the summer to do repairs of potholes on asphalt, only because we can, and it's a generally accepted practice to do so. And it's easier to work with asphalt than concrete, but we certainly realize that on some of the in some of the concrete street areas where there are potholes that we may need to address in the shorter term, they are more expensive to fix than asphalt streets. That's just a fact of life that the town manager referred to earlier. The expanded definition is certainly something that we're going to pursue. I think we need to expand the Almond Grove from its current definition, both west and south, but that will likely result in a longer-term strategy. I would see that once we're done with this, we'll probably have to make priorities and make choices based on what residential streets are almost minor collectors and what purely serve the residents, and those may be the types of decisions that we have to come to at some point. It's also important for us to note that when we go into these areas and we focus on the condition of the streets, which is extremely important, that we've got sidewalks and curb and gutter in many cases that are actually in worse condition than the streets, and we see the face of curbs that actually have fallen away from the park strip areas. And while we have been doing a fair amount of sidewalk replacement, we sometimes face the issue that you go back to a joint to do a saw cut only to cause another failure because the joint that you're saw cutting has concrete that's 1.5 inches thick and not nearly built to the same standards that we would have constructed it today. So it's going to be viewed as a complete streets package. I think we have to look at it from sidewalk to sidewalk on all streets and find a way that we can accomplish and replace what needs to happen. But we're very likely going to have to phase it, and we may even have to look to stage the construction in such a way that we don't upheave an entire neighborhood for an extended period of time. We'll have to come in and do small patch, maybe half a block here, move to another block, but this will no doubt be a project that takes us several years to fully address.
Well, I think it would be really important for our neighbors to know what the time frame might be. I think there's a certain frustration that occurs when there is no end point or is no start point. And so an outreach to that neighborhood, both the Glen Ridge neighborhood and the Almond Grove neighborhood, would be really important. And by the way, in terms of the poster child for sidewalks in that area, Bachman at Masal, I think that would be the southeast section of sidewalk. I think it gets an awful lot of skateboard attention because it provides air for kids who want to go through there. The other question is on Hernandez. This is on page C28. It's that section of Hernandez that is reminiscent of a bygone era where there is a open drainage just for about a block or so down there. And I assume that we're going to be able to move on that. It says we planned it for 13-14, but you describe this as emplacement of basically a pipe and then a fill over that so we can complete that street. And I know that people have to drive across makeshift bridges, so to speak. And I would recommend strongly that we take a look at that and see where we want to go with that and talk to those neighbors, because it's not that many, but and it certainly is aggravating to the neighbors up there. On page C44, this is the Pollard Road Bridge issue. I love this statement. The original funding has been largely expended, and further work is on hold until Saratoga secures additional funding. That makes me feel really good about this thing getting completed. What's your estimate on that, and how's that working out?
This, like several other projects in here, is a project that is predominantly grant funded. So I believe we have 80% of the funding lined up through a grant. The remaining 20% is going to be funded by 3 local agencies: the Town of Los Gatos, City of Saratoga, and Santa Clara Valley Water District. And I believe we're actually moving forward on this project in 10-11. It's largely going to be driven by the Water District's timetable. I believe they are the lead agency. I will look to Kevin for a quick nod on that. Saratoga is the lead agency, so this is one where we're contributing to, and it'll be driven by their timetable. This is a 10-11 project? It's a 10-11 project. It remains to be seen whether we'll get to construction in 10-11 or not, but the plan is to wrap up the design during the next fiscal year. There is some right-of-way acquisition that needs to occur for this project to be constructed, and I believe that there is a acquisition and potential legal issue on that as well. So that could delay it, but hopefully it won't, and we would be in construction the following fiscal year.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, and good luck to you on that one. And the last comment is the renovation of our child playground equipment at Bachman, Blossom Hill, and Belgados, the 3 Bs. And the only recommendation I noticed this is for ADA compliance and to upgrade. The only recommendation I would make is that we really do need to reach out to the neighbors on this, because I remember once upon a time, and other people in the audience remember this, where there was a proposal, I think it was from the Parks Commission, to put up the Purple Castle at Bachman, and it was soundly rejected by the neighbors. And what you got was this very neighborly play site. And if you go by there any day of the week, kids are all over it. They seem to really be enjoying it. And so my caution would be, before I move forward with anything, let's check it out with the neighborhoods to make sure that the amendments we're making are seen as appropriate to the needs of the kids in those neighborhoods.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Mrs. Spector? Thank you again, Madam Mayor. Mr. Caperso, streets. With regard to the Almond Grove, the study, do I understand that what you're going to have to be exploring is whether or not cement will be maintained, or if it's removed, or concrete will be maintained, or if it is removed, how far down? I mean, Or are you thinking about, yes, we're going to keep the concrete? What is the issue there as far as the study goes on that part of the study?
There are several factors on that. What you allude to is one of many, which would be the maintenance factor. So are we able to maintain concrete streets? As I mentioned earlier, there's not a very sustainable preventive maintenance program for concrete streets. Essentially, once you build them, you leave them out there till they fall apart. And unfortunately, that's what we're experiencing here. There have been successful treatments of concrete streets in other areas not that far away from us, where concrete streets can be asphalted over with the proper preparation. There's still some differentiation on what the useful life of that treatment would be, so you do need to weigh the cost-benefit of paving over treated concrete as opposed to completely removing it and then building it from scratch, which would likely be more expensive, but would have a much improved useful life. There is also the outstanding question on the type of material that we would be able to allow to the streets to be constructed in the Almond Grove because of its historical nature, which will be revisiting that issue with our community development department as well. So you have the aesthetics versus the construction issue.
All right, and so it seems to me what I'm hearing is you have done a very good job of explaining the complexities that you're going to face. You've heard a lot here about wanting to make these roadways better. You've explained to us about the cost, but then again, from the residents' point of view, and maybe even from the council members, this issue has sort of been floating around amorphously for a really long time, and nobody has their arms around what's going to happen when. It may be that you won't be able to tell us what's going to happen when, but I think that would be very helpful to us and to our residents.
I understand, and I think that some of the frustration on this issue is that it has been this mythical project in the capital program for probably 3 or 4 or 5 years now, and that we haven't got our arms around it. So still not quite able to answer the questions of how soon we can do what and how much it's going to cost, but that's the goal here, is to at least identify what we're dealing with, put some scope and financial magnitude to it, and then develop an implementation plan. So I understand that I hesitate to use the term, but I'll use it anyway, that there is some frustration on this issue, but the first step in that is going to at least fully identify the issue that we need to deal with, which we hope to do so very shortly.
And I think, if I can just put a comment in here, Mr. Larson, before you do, I think that's what we as a council decided when we had our retreat, because that was on there, and it was like, gosh, this problem is so big, we don't have extra money to pay for it, it's so complex. And so in the past, although we've all been aware of it, council has kind of, been able to just turn your head and say, oh, it's too hard to think about, I'll think about it tomorrow. And what we said at the retreat is, we need to think about it now, and that's why we made it the priority, which is why they are allocating time to actually figure out what it is, and then we'll have to examine our options and go from there.
It's ultimately coming back to this council as to where does the funding come from in the order of $3, $4, $5 million to do the work. Do we decimate the rest of the capital program for a 5-year period to focus on doing this? Do we phase a little chunk each year? Do we identify new funding? Are there assets we can sell to do this? And our hope would be to bring that decision back to you over the course of the next year.
Thank you. I wanted to ask about, Mr. Brzezinski asked about the Quito Bridge, which has been hanging around, which I understand is not in our control, although it's our responsibility since it's on the borderline. The Oak Meadow ADA, it feels to me like that's been hanging around for a long time, too. Is it really going to get done this year?
That's a very good question, and the hopefully very good answer is yes. I would like to tell you that it's probably, there is some benefit to it, to that project hanging around for a long time. The original project had a relatively modest scope, that it would construct a pathway around the turf area of about, I think it was originally proposed as about 4 feet. We've since been able to acquire additional funding from through VTA as part of our pedestrian access funding, and combine that with some of our previous ADA funding, which we get through CDBG. So I believe that now we've got a more viable project, which will actually link the. Well, it will initially do its original intent, which is to provide pedestrian and now bicycle access around the turf area, and it will be considerably wider than the original 4 feet. I think we're now proposing 6 feet for the majority of that area. And of course, I'm sure you've all been out there on the weekends. Even that may not be sufficient in all cases, but we'll still have a unpaved shoulder on the outside. Additionally, it allows us to connect the parking lot to the restroom building and the Billy Jones area in what we'll call a full-fledged service road, such that our staff can better maintain the facilities in the park, and the employees of the Billy Jones Railroad can now better access their facility without driving the uneven terrain on the site. So that's the long way of me answering your question and telling you, yes, it's really going to happen this year. We've already got some preliminary designs on that as well. So thank you.
Good, and all those moms with strollers will be really happy about that. Do we have any other questions on capital projects? Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. A quick one, and I just wanted to thank you for expanding the historic region that we're calling Almond Grove South. As far as that goes, and I'll recuse myself at the time, but I believe Broadway is the oldest street in Los Gatos, and going south of that and being included a concrete street again, I know is part of the problems that you face. Thank you also for recognizing the sidewalks. The sidewalks are probably worse than the streets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions of staff on capital projects? Okay, then we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. I have just one card. Chris Miller. If anyone else wants to speak, please turn in a card.
Good evening. Chris Miller on Ellenwood Avenue. I just wanted to thank you all for your consideration of this discussion item as you look to the streets. I was walking my dog the other day, and I ran past one of the houses on the street that's for sale. I picked up the flyer, and it said located on one of the most prestigious streets in the town. I thought, well, that's kind of cool to live on the town with prestigious, but then I got to thinking about the condition of the street, and if they saw the condition of the street, it's not that prestigious if you've been up in that area. So appreciate any effort that you can do. I also just wanted to echo Vice Mayor Pruszynski's comments about communication. I think that's very, 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 very critical. I remember when I was 16 years old and was having an interview as a student member for the Parks Commission, of which I served as 2 years as a youth member. I remember in that interview, one of the commissioners said, "Yeah, I remember you. You were that 12-year-old in the back of the council chambers that held a big sign that said, 'No Big Red Castle.'" And it's kind of funny that, here I am, 15, 16 years later, sitting in the back listening to you guys talk about communication and the importance of that as you work to develop streets and work to really determine what kind of, what our parks look like. And so I just hope that you can continue to really make sure that communication is done to the neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Seeing no other cards, I will go ahead and close the public hearing and turn to council. And council, our jobs right now are to provide comment and direction to staff on any changes on the proposed budget that you would like to see before they bring it back to us in June for adoption. And we also have a proposed resolution to deal with, which would require a formal motion. Would anyone like to speak? Mr. Larson, you want to make a motion, Mr. Larson?
No, I certainly don't. But I would like to just clarify, council can direct any changes they want in either the CIP or the operating budget that we would, with majority concurrence, bring back to you on June 7th. For the one-time transition funding, it would take council action to direct to include the $100,000 for long-term financial strategy set aside, as well as the $72,000 for police overtime, and then council discretion on $7,500 to the Friends for a grant to them, up to an additional $30,000 for professional librarian services, then the $40,000 for emergency preparedness.
And, Mr. Attorney, wherever you're hiding, would that require a formal motion, or is that just direction on that? I'm sorry. Direction? Okay. So, council, comments, direction? Anyone? We can't leave until you talk. Yes. Vice Mayor Puzinski.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the manager and staff for an excellent presentation of our situation. We know that these are tough economic times, and I did read a statement from Steve Conway that appeared in the San Jose Mercury News on Saturday. And basically, Mr. Conway said, we're putting more money into people who deliver services rather than maintaining the management hierarchy, says Town Finance Director Steve Conway. And therefore, Mr. Conway, I think you will do a great job at pothole repair when you get there.
I actually worked many summers in construction. I'm fully qualified.
Okay. Madam Mayor, the only thing I'd like to say is that, I think we've got an excellent report. We have direction to travel. I would like the council to move forward with this. If that requires a motion, then so be it.
As far as I understand it, the only motion that's required is for the resolution regarding the dissolution of the commission. So your comment, your direction would be forge ahead?
Yes, it would be.
All right.
That would be my direction.
Mr. Rice.
I'll echo that. I think that I'm also comfortable with the one-time transition funding as amended, so to speak. The 100 for the strategic long-term planning, 72 for the police department, and the 40 and 40. I'm comfortable with those as well. And I'll look forward to seeing this on June 7th. And again, I'll echo my fellow council members and thank the manager, the finance director, the finance manager, and the entire team for their efforts in putting this all together. Thank you.
Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. I'm joining the crowd here. And are we doing one by itself, Madam Mayor, or can we say yes to 1 and 2 moving forward?
1 and 2 what?
The two items we're supposed to consider. One is the 1 year, one is the 5-year capital improvement. One's the operating and one's capital improvement.
Operating and capital together?
We're doing them both, and I'd like to move forward as proposed as well.
Absolutely.
Mrs. Spector?
I have to jump on the bandwagon here.
Yes, you do.
Yes, going ahead with 1 and 2 with the reserves as modified. And I also want to weigh in on thanking the staff, because it isn't just tonight. It isn't just the past couple of months. The ability to have our revenues match our expenditures, our expenses, is something that staff has been working on, albeit at council request, but staff works on all the time. So it isn't just happening like that. It happens because there's a lot of work, so thank you all.
And, this is, as I was explaining to someone the other day, this is the most important action that we do as a council, because the decisions that we make on budget is what shows up in terms of delivery of service to the community. And we don't have a lot of people from the public here in the audience tonight, and I think that's a tribute to them feeling comfortable and confident that leadership in the town, both staff and council, are going to make the right decisions as they have the past few years. And the fact that we're moving along pretty briskly through the meeting, I think, is a tribute to the hours and hours and hours of thought and strategy that staff has put into this, and in just doing all of the hard work and presenting us with a limited number of options that we have to consider, and we're able to do that fairly expeditiously. Vice Mayor, you had something else you wanted to say?
Yes, I did. I think we can celebrate tonight for the new fiscal year, but it's obvious that we're not out of the woods. And I think that's the message that really needs to be communicated to our public, is that it's not over yet. Hopefully, the economy will rebound. Hopefully, that big old house would be purchased, as was recommended.
I was referring to a pre-Prop 13 valued home that would turn over, and that would always has been a welcome addition to our portfolio of assessed value.
Right, that's our cash cow, isn't it? But I think the key is this: we have to remain ever vigilant, so that we find ourselves in this same place next year, with maybe a little reduction in the gap that we're trying to fill. It would be extraordinary if, in the course of this next year, there is the increase in revenues that will offset the expenses, and maybe that gap will be smaller even next year. But I don't think we can rest on our laurels. So that would be kind of your marching orders. That congratulations on the job well done for the entire staff and the council. And the council over the last several years, the numbers of years that have set us up to be in a position right now so we can claim this place in our history and move forward from this point on.
We do have another piece of business. We do have a proposed resolution rescinding the Architectural Standards Hillside Committee. Does anyone want to make a motion on that?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion of that item? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And you had another comment on the budget, Mr. Wasserman?
I did, Madam Mayor. I wanted to give you kudos because part of this agenda item, number 12, ties into our core values and strategic goals. And I think it was you back at the retreat that said, let's take a look at that, let's change terms, let's analyze it, let's talk about it as a council. And I think the direction that was given by council at that time has served very well. We hadn't revised that. I've been on this for 8 years. Hadn't revised that in quite a while, and it was your idea to bring that up. And as I look at the various, especially core values, and then I look at where the dollars are being suggested to be spent, I think they're tying in very, very well with the direction. So I just wanted to give you credit where I knew you wouldn't take any.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Larson, do you need anything else other than yay, that we're done with that item?
We'll be bringing it back to you on June 7th, along with the library construction contract.
Okay. We do have one more piece of business this evening under other business, and that's item number 13, introducing an ordinance adding a new chapter to the Los Gatos Town Code entitled Neighborhood Preservation. And Mr. Martello will be giving us a brief staff report.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I have a little clicker here. Thanks for all the help from Gitta and other people on the PowerPoint. I would normally make a brief narrative comment, but after coming out of budget, it's probably best to show pictures. I only have 3 narrative slides. Just some of the things to show what I think everybody knows what neighborhood preservation is, and the ordinance before you this evening is about giving enforcement staff some additional tools to deal with what we often refer to as our problem children. So we have about, that first slide I think spoke for itself. This is standing water, probably an illegal fence. This is inoperable vehicles, trash, visible from the public streets. This is actually an operating junkyard with a car crusher. And this has been around for a while. Some more pictures of that. That's the yellow truck that you just saw in the last frame, and it's got some new stuff added. Now it's not switching. That's a car that's inoperable, obviously being worked on or salvaged. This is overgrown vegetation in addition to those problems. This may look okay, but the bike has not been licensed for 6 years. The trailer is actually hooked up to power for some reason. It's hard to see there, but there's electrical cords and there's plumbing and things like that. That's showing the lack of registration. There we go. This is not something you want next door. And you can see the houses, there's no incentive to fix the house. It's just literally falling apart. If you can keep in mind some pictures I sent you about a month ago from San Benito, that's probably the poster child, because what code enforcement is all about is basically whether you call it the broken window theory or pulling the string. It's if you have a bad house and there's some other rentals in the neighborhood, nobody will want to move next door, so then they get bad renters or bad owners, and then it starts a process. Amazingly, town staff achieves 95% compliance through personal contacts and letters. The culture in this town is so strong to maintain your property that people that maintain it, like you just saw the pictures, are the exception. The problem property owners, including many absentee owners, really don't care, and it takes so much time to get compliance. From a town staff standpoint, not only is that inefficient, it also makes us look like we're not doing our jobs or not very effective at our jobs. From an outsider's standpoint, this has worked over the years, even though it's taken long, because you have a broad range of folks willing to help. Public Works will help code enforcement. The police do a lot to help code enforcement. But what we're trying to propose this evening is something that will just make code enforcement probably more self-sufficient. The proposed ordinance tonight, it's probably that first step in that process. Will be easier to educate our problem children. In other words, we can show them a statement. It's not intended to be new law, and it could serve as the foundation for further expressions of neighborhood preservations. And I do expect this thing to be amended. If you go forward with it tonight, it will be amended over time. This is the last slide. If you have any concerns about any one line item or need more information on it, this ordinance, if you decide to go forward with it, you can delete any one item and ask it to come back for further study. Remember that both the city manager, through their assignment of resources and prosecutorial discretion, the idea of some of these items is not to become the thought police on whether you park your car out or leave your trash can out while you're on vacation for a day. It's really the problem properties. So when I go away, my trash can might sit out for 3 days till I get back on a weekend, but that's not what it's aimed for. So again, tools can be added, can be further refined or supplemented. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you have about the ordinance.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Seeing none, I have no cards for public comment. Seeing none, we're back to council. Vice Mayor?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to move to introduce an ordinance adding a new Chapter 30 to the town code entitled Neighborhood Preservation.
Second.
And if you could include the rest of those magic words, is that to be? He read it.
To be read in title only, for the reading waived.
Okay. Ordinance adding a new Chapter 30 to the Los Gatos Town Code entitled Neighborhood Preservation. Section 1 entitled Town Preservation or Neighborhood Preservation. Here I added to the Los Gatos Town Code and shall read as follows. You want all of that?
No. And this is, let me make a point of process. Trying to streamline the process for an ordinance introduction by reading that and by Councilmember Rice adding those words to be read in title, further reading waived, you've eliminated the need to read the title because you read it and you made a motion to be read in title only for the reading waived. So we will set the second reading if this passes.
Okay. Cool.
Was there a second?
I was the second.
You were the second and the modifier. Oh, that's right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. And Mr. Martello, you had anything else to say on that, or no?
No. Thank you.
Okay. We are now finished with the agenda item, and I will remind you that we are adjourning tonight's meeting in memory of Saratoga Council Member Susie Nagpal. Thank you so much.